Welcome into today's episode of Palmetto Sports Daily. I'm Ella Grogan, joined by Rick Henry, Kevin Bilodeau, and a new face today. Jill, welcome to your first episode of Palmetto Sports Daily.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I mean, I'm the weekend anchor here, so normally you guys don't see too much of me, but I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here, and we've got a lot of conversations to drag you into today, and that all starts with some Clemson basketball coming off a tough loss last night, snapping that win streak that they had going for quite a while. Now, this one was an interesting one, coming off of a huge run over on the West Coast, taking on Cal and Stanford over there, grabbing some great wins. But we were just talking about this before the show. A very interesting stat of the last 13 ACC teams who have gone over to the new Pacific CC teams. I don't know if we can call them the ACC, although they're in it. They have been 4-9 upon returning home, and Clemson feeling those effects of their travels. And guys, I kind of just want to toss it around to you and see what you all think about this effect of the travel on the players and how that's been implemented in these past couple years since Cal and Stanford joined the conversation. Kevin?
Yeah, it's hard to argue with those numbers that, like you said, the 13 teams that have gone out to the West Coast, they've all struggled once they came back. But it's something we talked about yesterday, too. I was more curious to see how this team came out, knowing they've got probably the biggest game of the year coming up on the horizon Saturday with that game against Duke. So I'm more interested in the way they played last night and disappointed that they didn't come out with a better effort, knowing that this was essentially a trap game. This was the definition of a trap game when they've got Duke coming up on Saturday. So the way they came out, I'm disappointed, Rick, and I don't know if that means they're going to bounce back when they get ready to go on Saturday, but they got to do better if they're going to hang with Duke and then again next week with North Carolina.
Yeah, I don't want to hear anything about these guys being travel weary, being fatigued. How old are they? They're in their 20s. I mean, they can bounce back easily, a lot better than folks my age and Kevin. We're old geezers. So I think it basically was a trap game. They were looking ahead to their big matchup with Duke. And now they better really get themselves motivated, get re-energized, or else, they're just going to get embarrassed by the Blue Devils. So I don't want to hear this, we're tired. Hey, get out there and just play.
I think the funny thing is that it's kind of a trend over the entire conference. We've seen it with multiple other teams in that realm. You could blame it on travel within the first couple of games, that's fine, but it's happening at the back end as well. So are you just excited that you're out in Cali, or is it, which one is it? So you got to make sure you're coming together as a team to just figure it out, because this isn't going away if they're staying in your conference.
Yeah, and Rick, I think Brad Brownell definitely agree. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was going to say something about Rick taking shots at me left and right, and it's calling me old, but I looked backwards and I hurt my neck, so I really can't say anything about that. But the other thing is, they had 4 days rest from getting back from California before they played last night. So, I don't know how long we're expecting to give them the travel, the jet lag excuse, but I think by that time, like Rick said, these are young guys, and they're now, essentially paid professional athletes, so they should be spending that time getting ready for this next game.
And I think Brad Brownell kind of agrees with all of us. In the press conference, he completely said the exact same thing. You can't blame it on being tired. We lost to a good team, and that was that. And then he was obviously, Kevin, like you mentioned, looking ahead to that huge Duke matchup where Brad said, a lot of our guys just didn't play well. And that may seem like a really silly thing to say and a silly excuse, but this is a team who plays all together. They don't have one guy. Their leading scorer is 39th in the conference in scoring, and he is their leading scorer. So he needs all of his players to come together for this Duke matchup, especially against a team who scores really high points. Here's what Brad kind of had to say about this game and how they got to turn this one around.
Hey, we've played a lot of good basketball here for a long time, and today was a time when we didn't, and we got to learn from it, just like we do on wins, and grow from it and be ready to go. It's obviously a tall task in a very quick turnaround for us. Obviously, we won't do anything physically tomorrow. It'll be mostly walkthrough, but we got to shake it off and get our attitude back in a good place and be ready to compete, because we just have to compete at a very high level. our margins aren't as big as some teams, and so we've got to make sure that we're all on point. And I'm confident we'll bounce back and be ready to compete. Here in a couple days.
Well, they're dancing with the Devils pretty soon, taking on Duke this Saturday. But Kevin, we've got a team over there also looking to bounce back. What's happening in Charleston?
Yeah, a couple of low country teams in action tonight, including the College of Charleston, coming off that really tough loss on Monday night against UNC Wilmington, a game where first place in the CAA was on the line. They fall to that one. They dropped that one at home, I should say. They fall to 0-4 against UNC Wilmington over the past year and a half, and that is something that has not kept the Cougars fans happy, especially on social media over the last couple of days. They have been voicing their displeasure with their inability to beat their rivals from North Carolina, and so the Cougars really need a bounce back tonight, and it's not an easy one either. They've got Hofstra coming in. CFC comes in as a 1.5-point favorite in this one at home. So they're going to need to really bounce back and hopefully not lose any more ground to UNC Wilmington as they wrap up the regular season against them in just a couple of weeks on a Sunday night up in Wilmington. So still have a chance to claim that number 1 seed in the CAA tournament, but they like I said, they had very little room for error going forward. Meanwhile, Charleston Southern, they have just been struggling over the last month or so. They've lost 8 in a row. They are back home tonight as well. They've got Presbyterian coming in. This is maybe the best chance that CSU has had over the course of the last 6 weeks to come away with a victory. And we've talked about it before, though, but so many of these games over the course of this eight-game losing streak have been really, really close losses. There was a 4-point loss to Winthrop, a 2-point overtime loss to High Point, a 5-point overtime loss to USC Upstate, a 4-point loss at Presbyterian, a 2-point loss in overtime at Longwood, and then a 6-point loss at USC Upstate in overtime this past Saturday. So it's not like they're playing bad. They're not getting blown out in the majority of these games. They are right there on the cusp, but they just haven't been able to turn things around. Another chance tonight, like I said, as they take on Presbyterian at home. We've got more coming up here on Palmetto Sports Daily. We'll be back right after this.
Now, welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. Now, CCU women's basketball is now taken on to their finally getting a road win. They've been having some trouble, 3-8 overall right now, going on the road before today's game against yesterday's game against ODU. And they finally got that win, really struggling on the road. They're going to need this one going into another road game going forward. But they're going to have to learn how to play with a lead. As of right now, they had a pretty steady lead going into halftime, but then ODU started to creep up a little bit, going 21-18, almost having a comeback within that fourth quarter. The Chants are going to need to learn how to play with that lead, like I mentioned, and just boosting their record going into the rest of the season. And then the Chants will look forward to baseball season going forward.
Yeah, we've seen them, start to play really well. It seems like they're starting to get on track a little bit and, kind of trying to get the whole thing together, as we would say. And, I've been impressed with the kind of turnaround they've had over the course of the beginning of this season, and it's good to see them playing as well as they are at this point.
You're also coming off of the issue here with they're allowing a ton of points on turnovers within that fourth quarter. So this team is coming together well and learning how to gel towards the back end of the season, but just learning how to handle that ball going forward to close out the rest of the season is going to be absolutely critical.
All right, that's going to wrap up this segment of Palmetto Sports Daily. We're going to take a quick timeout, and we'll be right back to talk some college baseball. Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. Yes, the temperatures are rising here in the Palmetto State in college baseball starting tomorrow for the Gamecocks. They're hosting Northern Kentucky. Now, they've changed the game times because of the threat of bad weather. So on Friday, they will have a doubleheader. First game starting at 1 p.m., second game starting 45 minutes after the conclusion of the opener, and the Saturday game time will remain at 2 p.m. Okay, Gamecocks coming off a 28-29 season, won just 6 SEC games, did not make the playoffs, and like normally you have a losing season, okay, that's pretty bad. But when you're South Carolina and just 14 years ago, they made their third consecutive appearance in the College World Series. They won back-to-back natties in 2010, 2011, and made it back to the championship series in 2012. So you go from the top of the college baseball world to now you're right there at the bottom. Paul Mainieri going into his second year, former LSU coach where he won a national championship with the Tigers, multiple SEC championships. And so for him, he's really got to get this thing going and start the climb back to close to the top of the mountain. Here's Coach Mainieri talking about getting ready for year number 2.
We've had enough success that I've been able to hang in there for 41 years without getting fired. I hope I can keep that record intact after this year. But, you go through some disappointments, and but you know that tough times don't last, but tough people do, and I don't think anybody's ever questioned my toughness. And I've done it all for the right reasons. I love working with young people. I love representing great universities. I love molding teams and putting them together. And like I said, because you're old, you've been through this. I went through this. I know you're probably tired of me saying it, but I went through this in my first year at LSU. And people wondered if they'd hired the right coach in Baton Rouge, believe me, back in 2007 or whatever it was. And the next year we went to Omaha, and the next year we won the national championship.
Now, the starting pitcher for tomorrow's opener is Riley Goodman, a redshirt freshman, did not pitch at all last year. And then in the second game of the doubleheader, it'll be Amp Phillips, a junior transfer from USC Upstate. And then the starter on Saturday, Brandon Stone, who was 2-7 last year. So 2 of your weekend starters did not throw a single pitch for the Gamecocks in 2025. Ella?
I feel like we've got to talk about Jake McCoy, Rick. I mean, both of us were at the baseball and softball media days just a couple weeks ago where Mainieri was praising him and the impacts that he thought that he was going to have on this team. And unfortunately, making that announcement before the season even started that he had a pretty nasty elbow injury. Rick, I don't know if you've been around practice or seen anything. I know these guys have never started before, but of the pitchers that we're going to see this weekend, how do you think they're going to compete and compare to such a legend that Jake was becoming?
Yeah, really, really tough news there for Jake and for the Gamecocks in general, because it seems like we've seen this script before where you think, okay, this is going to be the starting lineup, then someone is hurt, and you're kind of piecing things together and experimenting. The guy I really want to see is Amp Phillips, the transfer from USC Upstate. Sounds like he's got a pretty good arm and a lot of moxie.
How about that nickname, too? I feel like I'm already motivated by Amp himself. I want to turn it up, you know?
Okay, don't say Amp anymore, or else I'll run out of here and get a Mountain Dew.
Rick, what do you think Carolina has to do record-wise to keep Mainieri off the hot seat this year? Because there was a lot of people who wanted them to make a change after last year. I don't think the leash is going to be too long for him this year. I think he's got to go well above 500 just to stay out of trouble. What do you think?
Well, because it was such a bad year. I mean, it's the South Carolina program, a program that I've known to always be pretty decent. Even going way back to when I was in school, when they got to the College World Series for the first time in my sophomore year, 1975. They've always been decent. And to not make the playoffs, I think Coach Mainieri has to make the playoffs, or else the natives are really going to be restless. All right, and
we talk about those natives
speaking
as well,
of,
but sorry.
Okay, and speaking of the glory years of South Carolina baseball, Ray Tanner, the former coach, he is going into the College Baseball Hall of Fame. As a matter of fact, tonight, along with one of his former pitchers, Kip Balknight, and Coach Mainieri had some nice words to say about Ray.
I watched him from a distance, and I always respected him. And then when I became the coach at LSU and we competed against each other, he had terrific teams here in Columbia. And the competition was really great. It took LSU a while to catch up to South Carolina, but once we did, the competition was really great. But I always had such respect for the South Carolina program because I knew how Ray conducted business. He had a very disciplined team. They played fundamentally sound baseball. They weren't show-offy. They treated the opponent with respect.
All right, Ray Tanner, 6 trips to the College World Series with the Gamecocks, played for the championship 4 times, won 2, never had a losing season with South Carolina or at North Carolina State. Jill?
Quickly, I do have a quick question. The firing joke as well, for someone who's been in and around the team for so long, how does that resonate with you?
Okay, I didn't catch the first part of your question.
Just the joke in general, saying I've been doing enough, so I haven't gotten fired yet. What is the joke, and how does that resonate with you for someone who's been in and around the program for so long?
Oh, the joke about not getting fired? Well, you know what they say about coaches? You're hired to be fired, and I think that's just his way of bringing some some levity to the situation, because I mean, he knows he is in a vice grip here at South Carolina with the attendance going down and a lot of grumbling, so he has to get it done. Kevin?
Yeah, and he said some great things about Ray Tanner, and it's interesting, the dichotomy with Tanner having brought him in to be the head coach, and now Tanner's not there. He's not the AD anymore, and that's what I was curious about. The leash that Maneri is going to have going into this year, and now that it's a different AD, it's not the AD that's hired him. We know that ADs always want to have their own guys, and they want to be sure that they're the ones that get the credit for the good coaching, and they make sure they don't take the blame if they don't have to for the bad coach. So it seems like to me that Maneri, I think you're right. I think not just the playoffs, but I think they got to make at least a decent-sized run in regionals just to keep him off the hot seat going into this year. All right, we're going to wrap up this edition of Palmetto Sports Daily coming up right after this. And welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. We stick with college baseball, and it's going to be opening day all around the country tomorrow. That includes over in Conway, where Coastal Carolina, the team that came just short of winning that national championship last year, they open up at home, taking on Fairfield. But there's one guy that's not going to be in the dugout. That's head coach Kevin Schnall. You might remember in that final game of the season last year, Schnall ejected in that loss to LSU for maybe making contact with an umpire, allegedly. I don't know if I have to say allegedly because he's pretty much been convicted of that. But because of that ejection, Schnall not going to be in the dugout for the first 2 games of the season. Jill, how is Coastal getting ready to play these first 2 games without their head coach in the dugout?
I think the mentality overall is just stay the same, right? You only lost 3 games last season at home. You want to make sure that longevity continues into this season. Obviously, there's something going in your back of your mind without having your head coach, but that can't change the game plan. If anything, I feel like it should put a chip on your shoulder a little bit. And then there's going to be a ring ceremony as well going into this game for a lot of the seniors who were there as well. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on the coach being out. Ella, do you have anything to say?
I think we got to go back to how it all happened. I mean, I'll never forget seeing that video for the first time, and I think we need to have the debate. Was it a flop or not? Did the umpire really get hit that hard for this to lead to a 2-game suspension? I don't know. What do you think, Rick?
He was embarrassed because he fell, and he was just trying to, save a little face. But one of the worst calls I've seen in all the sports competition throughout the history of the world. So yeah, it was bad.
I think you got to look at the semantics of it, though. I mean, did he actually hit him hard enough or make contact with him hard enough to knock him down? No, probably not. But you can't be making contact with the umpire, period. I mean, if you start getting into the semantics of, well, he only, bumped him a little bit, and this, you start getting into that, then things start getting dicey, and then, like how long do we suspend him for? I think it's fine. Just 2 games, make him miss the first 2 games, and they're playing Fairfield. I mean, if Coastal couldn't beat Fairfield with me as their manager, then they've got bigger problems to worry about this season.
I 100% agree. They should be fine in considering who they're playing as well. But we talk about him being within the vicinity of him, if they're hitting him, if they're not. But I don't think that wound up happening. And a lot of the media there almost kind of forgot for a second that he was going to potentially be suspended for 2 games, gearing up for this. Everyone was all getting ready for practice. And then there was a conversation of, wait, is he going to be there for the first 2 games? And then we had to go into it and discuss it, and it turns out that is the case.
That had to have been a very interesting situation, Jill, and I agree with all of you. I think obviously action does need to be taken if it was a big enough moment, but Kevin, kind of like you said, I mean, in a situation where you're going to deal with a suspension, now's the time to do it. You want to get it over with now, whereas you don't want this to be happening in a regional round or something like that. So at least they're getting it over with. It can be in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, they're playing Fairfield, so that should be an easy assignment. Although, if he were the coach, I'd have to take Fairfield in a sweep. Just saying.
That's just rude. There's no need for that. We'd be running
So
hit
out
and
of left
runs
field.
and double steals all day.
Oh, yeah.
Rick, I
Hitting
could
and
outmanage
running
you,
your
Rick.
way
I promise you that.
right out of the game. Oh, my.
Rick could be
Coach
called
Billadou.
squeeze bunts all day.
Oh, man. Oh, and executing. We got to go. We'll continue this tomorrow. Bye.